Hello everybody, Adrian Plass here,
Yes, and Bridget. Hello.
and number 244 in Sounding the Shadows.
It is. It's been quite a significant week for you, hasn't it, in a way?
Yeah, it has actually, yes, in an unusual way, because I had an email from an old friend. When I was a boy, I went to secondary school, I went to grammar school in Tunbridge Wells, at a school called Skinner's School. And Skinner's School used to be a public school, and it still retains some of its kind of public school bits and pieces. It had a school song which was very rousing in Latin.
We had a rugby school song for some obscure reason in our school, but anyway, carry on.
That we used to sing this song, and there were things on the walls and wooden scrolls and things. But the lads, it was a boys' school, were very much of the present day, and this person was there at the same time as me. He came into the first year. I was in 1 Blue, which was Mr. Pamment's class. I can't quite remember whether my friend was in the same class or the class opposite in that block, but anyway, there we were. And going from Rustall Big Boys School, which was where I had been.
And that was what, 8 to 11? Something like that?
No, it wasn't, because I suppose it must have been up to 11.
Well, 11 plus was at 11, so...
No, I know. It just didn't seem to work. No, that is right, yeah. And that had been very much a very local school, so the grammar school seemed very big, and you were divided into 4 houses, and your jacket had different coloured piping according to which house you were in. I was in Sebastian, which was white. Okay. Anyway, so I don't remember this friend of mine that much in those years, right at the beginning, although I do remember him. But I remember a number of things, and it's interesting. What's interesting was how your safety is shaken by change like that. And I discovered there was a school bully.
I think everybody discovers there's a school bully.
I'm sure they do. He was a large boy, and later on, while I was at the school, I remember he and his friends viciously tortured a boy who had no resistance at all, and used to hear him screaming and shouting.
Oh, goodness sake.
And I always wondered why the teachers didn't do anything, but maybe I don't know. Anyway, he was horrible, and I saw he was horrible. I was only 11, and somehow this is typical of my life. I went up to him, and I said, "You're a fool."
Wow.
And he looked at me in blank astonishment, because he was in a high year. I think, probably 2 years up. And I suddenly saw he was going to attack me. So I ran as fast as I could away from him. And I remember running over the tarmac, down the steps, until suddenly, thank goodness, I saw my brother.
Oh,
my
really?
older brother, who was there.
Yeah.
And he managed to placate this monstrous individual. I'm not sure what he said, or said he didn't mean it or something. But I always remember being rescued at that particular moment. So there was that going on. And there was also a different feeling about who was special and who was not at the grammar school, because...
Tell me what that means.
Well, in the school the junior school where I'd been, if you were doing quite well in class, that was okay, but it didn't have the significance that it did at the grammar school. But you went to the grammar school because you had been designated bright enough to go to the grammar school. And I did very well in the first year. 1 Blue, I think I said. And
with
then,
your white piping on your jacket.
With my white piping on my jacket. And then after that, I didn't do too badly in the second year, but by then, other pressures from outside, sort of chaos at home and things like that, were pressing me. And if you didn't do well in the 2, whatever it was, then as you went up, so you degenerated until you ended up in a sort of pit of a class in the 5th year. And it was at that point, when everything seemed to be going incredibly wrong, that I decided truanting was a good idea. And I had, the boy I'm talking about, I had got to know a bit, but I got to know much more later on. But during my, it's funny to remember this because, as I said to you earlier, you open the door, as this person did with his email, and I was really glad he contacted me. And suddenly memories just tumble out. And
are they dry memories by now, or did they produce in you the same feelings that you had at the time?
I think they laid slabs of dismalness in me that don't steer me. Mixing my metaphors horribly.
No, I love it.
They don't
Keep
steer
going.
me anymore. But putting my jacket with my white piping on every morning, and going.
Blazer, you mean?
Blazer, yeah. And then going on the bus to where the school was, and then crossing the road from the school and going into the park just beyond there, where there was a sort of shelter where you could sit. And that was my day. So I would be in the shelter. Because I was a serial reader, if I was lucky, I would have a book with me. And there was a strange character who used to frequent this area too, who used to give out cigarettes to the boys, and round about break time and lunchtime, a sort of small mob would form.
This is quite a depressing tale.
Yeah, it is. No, I'm just saying all these things come back to you. So there was that, and there was also the knowledge, although I don't think I could have put it into words then, that I shouldn't be doing this badly. I shouldn't be going through, and it is those who haven't been truants won't understand this, but the inner agony of wasting your time because you're avoiding something that makes life too difficult for you.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? How hard one can work at avoiding doing something. I was thinking, Adrian, this is totally random, but what came into my mind when you said that was when we were first working with children, there was a boy who hated cleaning his teeth. Do you remember? And he would go to most immense trouble to not clean his teeth.
That's
so he
right,
would put the toothpaste on the brush
Yeah.
and run the water, so it sounded as though he cleaned his teeth. And then he'd have to wash the toothpaste off the brush again in order to put the brush back. And once we discovered that, we were amazed by how much work was involved in not doing something.
Put an enormous
But I
amount of work
suppose
into
one
it,
of the problems is, I mean, I look back and I think, why didn't a teacher question where you were? And I think we're talking about a period of education where teachers didn't. They were there often, and you said you were at a grammar school, they would have had a degree in their subject, but they wouldn't have had teacher training as such to train to, and some wonderful teachers were there, but it was only that they happened to be those sort of people, not that their training taught them to look out for the children who are falling behind or falling off or falling. I mean, wouldn't have been just you. There, in every school, there will have been children who fell off the edge.
Yeah.
With people not really noticing.
Yeah, that's true. And this poor lad who got bullied so badly was one of those. And I can still see his face. Actually, I can remember it. But a little later on, when the truanting had ended because I'd left school.
So it ended because you'd left school.
Exactly,
right, okay.
because I'd left school. I had two safe areas, I remember. One was smoking, which I really enjoyed.
So now you were smoking and reading. When I met you, you were smoking and reading.
And I was reading. And while I had still been at school, as I think I've said this before somewhere, but I used to cycle to school when I did go to school, and quite often smash into the back of a stationary car because I read on the handlebars. So there would be an almighty explosion of car, bike, bag, me, white piped blazer, all over the road, and then I'd get off and set off reading my book again on the handlebars, because I just loved being lost in the world of the book, and the smoking, which I'd started about the age of 14, I suppose. I was talking to someone this week who was a smoker, and when you smoke a lot and you're lonely, your cigarettes become your friends. They don't argue with you. They don't criticize you. They don't disapprove of you, and so it's very hard to let go of.
And I mean, let's be honest, that applies to any prop, really, doesn't it? You know, that it becomes your friend. Whether, I mean, for some people it's alcohol, and for some people it's various things that they're doing. I'm quite sure the mobile phone has taken that place for loads of people. You know, you're on your own somewhere, but you're not going to feel lonely because there's always something you can look at on your phone which makes you feel you're connected with the world. It's very difficult because that filling of time means that actually you're not growing in a way, are you? You're just somewhere stuck in a sort of, like on a strange deserted railway platform. You're nowhere, but you're in a book, and therefore it keeps you safe, or you're having a cigarette and that keeps you safe.
And they were both very enjoyable pursuits. I loved the reading and I loved the smoking.
So where did the cracks appear in that meant that you moved into another world from just being on your own and with your books and your cigarettes? I mean, how old are we talking about now? Sort of 15, 16?
Well, I left school at 16, I guess I must have done.
Well, people left school at 15 then.
15, yeah, maybe 15. And I had some friends, and that was all new. And there was a pub in Tunbridge Wells that sold very, very strong cider.
To 16-year-olds?
Well, if they looked old enough.
Yeah, and you were quite tall.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Benenden cider.
Oh, gosh.
I think it was. And you needed to drink very little of it in order to go home very early. Maybe get there to drink some of this, wish you hadn't, and go home, basically. That was a Friday or Saturday night.
That sounds tremendous.
Which didn't have any money either. But all through that, I loved talking. I loved talking to people and listening to people and watching people. So I sometimes would sit in cafes in Tunbridge Wells. There was a big department store there, so I sometimes sit in there.
And are you, I mean, in retrospect, Adrian, can you see, I don't mean value, that's a ridiculous word, but I mean, once you did join a youth group, once you did get connected with the church, once you did become a Christian, if you like, start the road, are you glad in retrospect that you had that period before that, or do you just put it down to a miserable bad luck? I mean, or do you see any value in it at all?
It's interesting you ask that, because I have no idea.
That's just the sort of answer to the question.
No, I mean, it was a desert of a life, I have to say.
Yeah.
That. The Christian thing, like so many, and this happens to many, many people, you see a community, you hang on the edge a bit, thinking, I wish I was part of something. It appears to be easy enough to be part of it, and so you do the thing that traditionally brings you into the centre of that. So that happened, and yes, it was the beginning of a whole new life, although I really didn't understand then that we talk about conversion and you ask Jesus into your life and then everything's all right sort of.
You certainly would have never known
we know
that
that isn't
all
true.
these years later, though, that it still burns in you, that it is a central passion in you.
No, that's absolutely right. Yeah,
Your motivation for joining, I know you've always said, was you realised there were some quite nice-looking girls at the youth group, and
yes.
you know that was quite an attraction before
Yes,
God.
it was, yes.
But I mean, the fact is, it stuck. So something happened to this very lonely boy that has stayed in you.
Well, I think it will, and you won't be surprised to hear this because you've heard it before. It was a yes. There was some bloke came to speak at the church, I think, and he was talking about.
Oh, what was his name?
Oh
no, don't worry, we're going to forget. It'll
Yes.
come back about 5 hours later.
Yes, I know, I'm sorry. He was talking about the thief on the cross. He was talking about Jesus, him saying to Jesus, "Remember me when you come to your kingdom." And the thing that struck me then and strikes me now, still in the same way, was that the response wasn't, well, it depends on your Bible reading or your prayer life or any of those other things. He just said yes. This is the trouble with Jesus, that he ruins everything. You look for a rule, you look for a line, you look for a road to follow, you look for a thing you should say or do or be, and then you suddenly realise that he talks about salt and light, and salt is the flavour that can be brought into life, and I'm almost embarrassed to say it because it's so important to me. The flavour of that influence, not all the time, but in my life has been immeasurable.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad for you that it started like that, with that big fat yes, because when I look back at my teenage, I really wanted something other than the life that I was having. I'm not going into all that now, but it wasn't going great either, but in a different way. But I somehow had got it into my head that if I tried really hard, then maybe God would like me. You
remember thinking that?
Well, yes. I mean, on Sunday mornings, I would cycle from where we lived in Norwich up to the centre to go to church to take communion, always on an empty stomach, because I believed that somehow you weren't supposed to have communion on a full stomach, so you didn't have breakfast. I did that every Sunday with this hope that this would somehow please God. And I was then confirmed. And at that confirmation service, I again thought, now something's going to happen. I am now going to know what it feels like to be loved by God. And I didn't. Nothing happened to me. And I think by the time I got to university, it was already crumbling. And then it just got worse because everybody had a theory much more interesting than my very middle class, nothing had happened.
Failed experience.
It was
really.
A failed experience. In fact, it was only after meeting you, really, that it started triggering back again, this yearning for something more. So that's why I was asking you whether you were glad that the yes that you heard came into a desert. It was like and it was the first thing you heard that changed your life, not if you go on your bike for 5 miles to go to church before you have any breakfast, then maybe God will say yes to you. So it's interesting. I'd love to know what other people's experience has been, whether when they look back, maybe as far as school, or maybe certainly at a point in their lives, how it started for them and why things went wrong for them or went right for them. Because I think that yes survived all the other stuff that happened to you after that. I mean, I know you said didn't feel as though God went home with you for a long time, and I know you struggle with all sorts of things to do with the church. but yes,
and it was also the unconditional nature of the yes.
Yes,
because everything else in life seemed to have a price tag on it.
Yes,
and
a pressure of education that you'd failed at, and
exactly. You couldn't have what you wanted because
you'd screwed up.
Yeah, so the feeling that what was being said was, even I had absolutely almost no understanding of it, obviously, but what filled me was the idea of not even being liked or approved of, but accepted as I actually was. And although you're right, after that, there were alarms and excursions left, right, and centre for some time, but it's still, for me, the message that is in me, and to be a yes. And obviously
and your mum was a
failed at
yes.
that
Your
as well.
mum was a big
Yeah,
fat
she
yes
was,
to
yeah,
me and
yeah.
to my children and to the rest of her grandchildren, accepting them exactly as they are in their individuality. And so she gave me a yes. And I think that yes to you was already there from your mother. And it often is in people when they look back and they think, yes, there was a person who had always given me that yes.
We discovered that with children in care, didn't we?
Yeah.
That often, although they seem pretty bleak in their outlook, they would have, if you talk to them at length, there would be a moment with somebody or an experience with somebody which they would never forget. And one of the difficult things for us, of course, was much later. You'd work with a child and then you'd move because you were going to look for a different job or something, and they would much later in their lives contact us and say, I remember you said one day I'll come round the corner and you'll come round the same corner and we'll meet. And so I'm very grateful for anyone who's done that for me. For me, and more than one person has done that.
I would really, really seriously love to hear about the yeses in your life. I know. Well, it would just be really, really lovely to hear people who gave you a yes at a time maybe where there weren't a lot of yeses going on. I don't think that's a sentence either, but it would be really nice.
And thank you to my friend for contacting me, and I hope we'll meet soon. But and probably put some more memories together. Yeah.
Probably find you all remember different things.
Yeah, that'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, there we are, and we'll see you next week.
We will.